Saw the RBA yesterday keep the rates on hold. This is after 10 consecutive rate rises. You've been on this program previously saying that the RBA shouldn't change its monetary policy to respond to, say, volatile markets, and it should have a macro view. If its task is to deal with inflation, then it should stick to that. Do you still hold that view, and therefore do you disagree with the decision yesterday to keep rates on hold?
Look, I still hold that view. I think the reason the RBA put rates on hold is they're waiting to see what the macro data says. Look, it's good news that rates didn't go up this week, but we have to remember that for many Australians, this isn't the end of the pain. In fact, for many Australians, the real pain hasn't even begun. They are people who are on ultra-low fixed rates that are about to flip into variable rates, and they will see their interest go up from something like 2% to something like 5% over the course of the next 6 months. So one of the reasons why the RBA is pausing is to wait and see the effect of that significant increase that is yet to hit many Australian families.
And you think that we will still ultimately need more rate rises to get us back to the target inflation of between 2 to 3 or 2 to 4%?
Well, the Governor was pretty clear about that in his speech today. He said it is much more likely than otherwise that we'll have more rate increases. And the purpose of the rate pause is to wait and see how the economy develops. So it's very much pushing pause, not pushing stop on the rate increases, unfortunately.
What's your view on this, Andrew? Bragg?
Well, I think it's very clear that the government in Canberra has been massively fueling inflation with its expansionary fiscal policy, and that is putting pressure on the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates. There have been 10 interest rate rises since the election when Labor came to power, and I fear that there will be more because the government in Canberra is making the Reserve Bank Governor's job so much harder, and ultimately the government should be held accountable for making lives so much harder, particularly for those of us that have mortgages.
Yeah. I think it was 9 since the election.
Can I correct that? I think it's 9
since the election. One was during the election campaign.
And one was while the Liberal government was in power.
But putting that aside, do you want to respond to Andrew Bragg's claims there that you are running an expansionary budget, and it's true that the October budget had net spending growth?
Well, the one interest rate rise that Andrew misallocated to Labor is actually a really important point because it signals the fact that this tightening cycle began when the Liberal government was in power and was the consequence of the macroeconomic conditions left by the Liberal government, including a record debt, including bottlenecks across our supply chains. And all of those factors are the reasons why inflation is high and why the RBA is increasing in interest rates now. So,
Andrew Bragg, do you want to respond to this? Do you want to jump in here?
I mean, the main point here is that the government have spent more money than they should have since the election. They've set up $45 billion in off-balance sheet items. And there's another $10 or $15 billion they've locked in through recurrent expenditure. So the government is running an expansionary fiscal policy, which is putting pressure on the Reserve Bank. That's a fact.
All right.
Well, I mean, that $45 billion of off-balance sheet expenditure, not a dollar of that has been spent. So it is a little bit unrealistic to blame those items for interest rates and inflation that are in the rearview mirror because none of that has begun. So you'll have to find another culprit to blame for these interest rate rises, and you might not have to look too far away.
Well, the IMF is disagreeing with you. They've warned about the presence of these off-balance sheet items. So